Good morning and welcome to everyone, our panelists and our participants. Just to welcome everybody to our meeting today, the theme of which is silencing the guns. And we are focusing on Africa as it is Africa Year in terms of that theme. And it is also Youth Month. So everything that we're going to be deliberating today will touch on the aspirations of Africa in general, including as we reflect on what's happening to the youth and the problems that they face, how they can be solved in the context of the problems that are taking place in Africa as we seek to unite Africa and create a peaceful and prosperous life for Africans. I have a panel of experienced and very knowledgeable intellectuals. They're all experts in the fields that they are working in. They have been selected specifically because of their knowledge around the issue of language. It's not just language per se, it's language as used across the borders in the continent. And as I'm going to hand over to them, I'm going to request them to kindly introduce themselves. And today I'd like to say to my colleagues, do not feel restricted. Please do indicate who you are, what you do in the field of language, in particular, the vehicular cross-border languages that have been selected by the work that has already been done by the Department of Arts and Culture in partnership with Akalen and member states in the regions of the whole of Africa. And I am glad to see their faces. I can see they're ready. And I'm very happy that they are very keen to share the knowledge that they have amassed over the years studying and researching this very difficult subject in terms of, what is language and how does it connect to culture? Sometimes it's a very difficult notion to understand, but we live it. We know that culture is language, language is culture. Now the relationship is homologous. It's difficult to tear these two apart because they are intertwined. But now the problem we have is how do we use these cross-border languages to help us solve the conflicts that have thrown Africa into a time of peacelessness, disease, and poverty. Thank you very much. I think we're going to call again on our next praise poet.
sam. Zizenzo zaku. Yamrishinto benkulu yakhanga umane yalandula aphuthuza amabhetanga bibisha amazinyo ephuthe baba mekhala umbhali wasuka wabhebhetha. Ebekude ukuhlekisa amaloko yam kodwa wayilahla imbo yakho ngophoyana. Bekudova bekunyathela bekubiza ngenqantosi mhlaba omnyama mhlaba okhokho masimahlaza masimachumileyo athunyiswe kukuzinga nebhongo lama-Afrika. Kunike ama-Afrika ndithi hutshu ngenxa yenyameko yakumela inyaniso nenzondelelo yokugcina uzinzo lwe-Afrika. Kuba kaloku lo mhlabana lamatyenjigolide nesilivere inkazindo yafingenakuthi hayi xa berhutile abarhwaphilize eqhaba zamaqhalanga. Qhubekani izinto ndina nizintokazi. Qhubekani makwathina nimagqiyazana. Niza nimthobela uThixo wayihlomkhulu yintsa uphaluke ukurharha bungqika ngoba kaloku lwephantsi iqhina likantshoni owabona ngumprofethi utsibele mthobeli elafana gqilazwa lenzo makhoboka inamigegemba amabhule bamayilili amathindithi namathinge namatshijolo. Rhola ihlahla ntukamandela sithi bayathekwa lezulu wanothwela uthuthu lwezitho zengwevu zangaphambili omxenge oSteve Biko, Chris Ali, Robert Sobukwe, Jomo Kenyatta, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Julius Nyerere, Kenneth Kaunda. You have held the dignity and the stature of the African child in the entire universe. You have brought back freedom and democracy into the African continent. Nilukhwali luhlahla lwenhlonipho yokuhlonitshwa komntu omnyama weAfrika kwilizwe liphela. Nilukhwali luhlahla lwalufuthu lwalukrwatshilizwe lwaza lwaphukanya ebuhlungwini betyhefu yerhambela emnyama labentlanka. Keep on keeping on. Keep on keeping on. Qhubekani izinto thina nizintokazi. Qhubekani makwathina nimagqiyazana. This is the time. This is the time to embrace our indigenous languages, to craft and form one language, one love, one goal, one purpose, one destiny, one God, and silence the guns in Africa and the world at large. Keep on keeping on. Keep on keeping on. Keep on digging deep and high of prestigious knowledge and wisdom, uprooting the deadly spray poison of ignorance. This is the Africa that we want to see. This is the Africa that we want to see. You are the pillars of the world. You are the gold. You are the regional gold. You are the continental gold. You are the African gold. You are the global gold. Africa is the gold. As the ancient times of Egypt, where the oldest gold artifacts dating 1352 BC to the ancient golden rhino of Mapungube found in the royal graves of African kings and queens, to all the astronauts that explore global planets with courage and resilience. Today, it feels good to be an African. The people without the knowledge of their culture, their traditions, and their history of origins, their languages, they are like the tree without roots. I am not an African because I was born in Africa, but I'm an African because Africa was born in me. Once said, I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the seas, the trees, the deserts, the flowers, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of my native land.
Siyabulela, dadewethu siyabulela, Sisomhle Jessica Mbange I know how I feel after she's rendered this praise poem. The inspiration, something rising up from inside of us to say, go on. You are the people. You are the ones to take Africa forward. That was easy to understand because it's one of our Nguni language. isiXhosa. She touched on many things. And I know Mpoto was on the same kind of spiritual and mental level. I was going to invite him to sort of interpret for us exactly the essence of what he was saying, although I caught the spirit, I caught the energy. And I think I'm grateful to our brother and our sister. Thank you so very much. And going forward, we shall always remember you to be part of what we do, because you are the soldiers. You are the ones that are charging us on. And it's amazing what language can do through poetry. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. The Director General, the Honorable Mr. Vusumuzi Mkhize Kabaze, Ingangawe Bab. We're welcoming the DG to open the meeting officially. Siyabonga Kabaze.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity, and greetings to all the participants, program director and facilitator, Doctor. One is really appreciative of your time to participate in the issue of indigenous languages, because without our language, we don't have identity. So I really appreciate your this platform that has been created. And I think Africa Month, in fact, when the president and the chair of the AU, President Ramaphosa, spoke and was participating with the AU in celebrating the Africa Month as well as the Africa Day, it was one of the very important ways to show that Africa is moving forward. I'm saying that because we did not sit and wallow in the midst of what we call COVID-19 pandemic and then have nothing to do or to say. So I would like to really say that they gave us, as leaders of the African Union, the very clear message that Africa will rise again and Africa will thrive beyond COVID. But in that context, AU also, we must praise them and be proud of what they've achieved in relation to looking at the issue of indigenous languages and promoting how Africans can interact and communicate with one another by looking at the role of Swahili as one of the key areas of promoting Africans' ability to communicate with one another. Because we are still living in bondage in terms of language on how we engage. If you look at, we're still defining ourselves across the Berlin Conference as Francophone or Anglophone or Portuguese or as Belgian languages. We are still perpetuating the agenda of colonialists in the manner in which we undermine the role of language. Language has got power to develop one's intellect, one's sense of self-esteem, one's sense of self-actualization to grow. Educationally, science has proven that if you have your first language being taught as a basis then to add on other languages, your intellectual stimuli is much stronger. So I am excited to be part of this because this moment also, if you look at social cohesion, if you can communicate and understand one another as Africans, we laugh at each other, we have xenophobia and attack one another on the basis of the boundaries that we really did not create. We have then the greatest disservice being done to Africa because we are not able to cohere and to relate to one another. And Africa is what has got the richest resource materials. Africa is the youngest continent. Africa has been faced with the worst kind of oppression by outsiders. Now, Ngugi Wathiongo has spoken about the issue of language, where he talks about the language, politics of language, and the language of politics. Now, why I'm emphasizing this point is that languages that are facing extinction and languages that are not being developed and grown by ourselves are our own very own languages. Because as Africans, we would rather relate to one another through English, French, or Portuguese, or any other language, just because I don't want to use your language. Psychologically, it means we have a damage to repair. Because if I try to speak your language, because they will call us then tribalist, or they will call us ethnic, and then we fail to find and break the barriers, and therefore understand your culture, understand that scientifically our languages are old, we can grow them. So we need to work then towards promoting these languages by creating research opportunities in our own languages, and be able to say indigenous knowledge systems were not based in foreign language. They were based in our own languages. So when we talk about indigenous knowledge systems, it must be our responsibility to conduct research, to then also, in terms of the literary world, start writing our own books to tell our own stories. Now, the third thing that I think we need to do to promote this as part of our social cohesion and economic transformation is that even when we have to deal with issues of subjects like maths, subjects like science, subjects like astronomy, let it be our responsibility, again, to develop the scientific basis of our languages. In South Africa, for instance, Afrikaans was a deliberately developed language. Not that it suddenly grew. We need to deliberately invest in these languages. All African governments must invest in the language development so that we are able to work on that. But we, as bureaucrats, we must then mobilize communities to feel that their languages are an honor, but that will come if they are utilized. Whether I go to look for a job, or I go to apply for a job, or I'm an entrepreneur, we can be like Germans, we can be like Russians, we can be like Chinese, only if we remove the blind of our own thoughts and liberate our minds, that our languages are worth the salt and they are as rich as any other language, but we must deliberately invest in them. So let's mobilize our communities, mobilize business and private sector, mobilize government, have clear policies that will develop and protect these languages. In that way, I believe we will be doing a great favor for the future generations who must not find our languages are still looked down upon and undermined. I would like to thank you for the opportunity and wish you well in this engagement and this dialogue. I think it's important and it is of great value. Ngiyabonga kakhulu. Asante sante. Thanks.
Abazeli, siyabonga Mkhize, siyabonga baba. Sibonga ukusikhuthaza, sibonga ukwazi ukuthi unokuqonda okujulile. Yezwakala into oyikhulumile ukuthi umqondo ujulile in terms of these issues that we're talking about today. We appreciate your work at the Department of Arts and Culture. Siyazi ukuthi ifosho lolishaywa uDirector General kanzima, uMinister under pressure kwayena to achieve the goals that have been set for the African Union going forward. All the initiatives of Agenda 2063 are going to be carried out through language. We understand that very much because we're trying to reclaim our identity. Siyabonga Kabazela, siyabonga ba. Thank you. I think before I call on our panelists, I just also need to acknowledge, I'm not sure who's on the podium, rather audience, but acknowledge Your Excellencies, the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Minister Nkosinathi Mthethwa. We acknowledge you, Nyambos. Acknowledging our Director General, Wesmuzu Mkhize, who has just opened the meeting officially, and welcoming him together with the Minister. We also acknowledge the Major General, His Honorable, His Excellency Gaudence Milanzi, Emeritus High Commissioner of the United Republic of Tanzania. We thank you, sir, for your work and support for these initiatives. There are African emissaries to the African Union present in the audience, our distinguished guests, delegates, and dear colleagues. All protocol is observed. I will say how pleased I am to welcome you to this day where we celebrate Africa and we celebrate Youth Month. From the highlights given by the Director General, we have sensed that it is very important that languages be developed. From our colleagues, our panelists introducing themselves earlier on, that came out very clear that our languages, African languages, indigenous languages, however you want to refer to them, are worthy of being intellectualized. They are worthy of being developed, that they must be produced literature, books to learn these languages, to develop these languages to a place where it is possible to intellectualize them. We appreciate the intellectualization as explained by Professor Kumalo. We understood what that means. That's the sentiment that the DG emphasized on. These languages matter. These languages are part of our identity, and so therefore we must learn them. We need to understand that we need them to live together. And also not to just say, no, this is not my language. I speak a different language. I am not engaging, anything like that. There is somehow a very natural way of how these languages live together. And we have heard a little bit about Kiswahili and how it was promoted to the level it was to be able to function in different contexts very successfully. Now, Kiswahili is spoken by many people in Tanzania, maybe the majority, as a lingua franca. The other languages may exist in slightly different contexts, but we're here to deliberate to see how these languages can work together to promote each other. We've sensed a little bit of that from Professor Mtembe's introduction. And so we're looking forward to hearing more of that, the intellectualization, how we can use these languages side by side to help develop them as they develop together. The DG say they are very old now. They really need to be growing to be able to capture the developments of the modern day. We thank the DG for that. So ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate everybody. We appreciate the work that the Department of Arts and Culture is doing. However, in this regard now, the Minister of Arts and Culture is sponsored this meeting so that it can take place in partnership with member states, represented here by different colleagues and the Pan-African Cultural Experience Group. And the minister has taken forward this initiative to make sure that the commitment of this country as a leader of the continent is taken forward. So we understand how far he has gone with that. In October last year, he held a celebration in South Africa for indigenous languages. And in February earlier this year, in the KwaZulu-Natal province, was celebrated the Mother Tongue Day. And here we are today, still deliberating on issues of language. I would love to thank the panelists. I would like to thank them for the work that they have prepared for us to share a little bit more in terms of where we can go with these languages. And clearly, everybody who has spoken earlier, and these things were underscored by the Director General, and we can see that there's much to be gained from close collaboration between languages in Africa to achieve the Agenda 2063 objectives, because we need to create a peaceful, united Africa. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Can I call Professor Khumalo to come on? Thank you, Prof. If you can, do take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is Professor Langa Khumalo from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I'm a linguist and also the Director of Language Planning and Development at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I have also worked across the continent, and I am the current chair of the isiZulu Commission in the African Union under the Secretariat of the Academy of African Languages. And I've worked with various other organizations in the development of African languages as languages that can be used in all the spheres of life. And the effort to intellectualize African languages as languages of teaching and learning, as languages of research, as the languages of science and technology, as the languages of innovation. It's an effort that requires a lot of support from all stakeholders, including government and the African people themselves. because the effort is to affirm African identity, to affirm the self-confidence of African peoples, and to locate ourselves within our culture and heritage in advancing both African languages and ourselves as the citizens of this continent. Chair, thank you very much. That's my brief.
Appreciate that, Professor Khumalo. I would like for you to, we're not really engaging your presentation just as yet, but for the sake of our audience, to just explain to us what you mean by language being the tool to not contextualize, but intellectualize. I'm not sure what it is we're intellectualizing, but just there, I'm interested for the sake of the audience. It's very important because we're talking science, we're talking technology, we're talking innovation, we're talking culture, we're talking our traditions and all of that. The intellectualizing part is very interesting because a lot of times people will associate that with Eurocentric values. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe I should very quickly locate our languages within the history of colonialism in Africa. And I always do cite from the literature that the contact between the colonial authority and African people was a very violent one, which euphemistically involved, among other things, the cutting of African tongues, the suppression of African languages, and their depreciation. And because that happened during the colonial period, and over time, when African countries attained their independence, one of the things that remained unresolved was the status and role of African languages in post-colonial Africa. And the suppression of African tongues meant that our confidences were also suppressed. The confidence to speak in our African languages, the confidence to think in them, and the confidence to innovate in African languages was suppressed. This is very clear in the way institutions have retained the colonial infrastructure. African languages are still up to today proscribed in the academy. They are not allowed as languages of teaching, as languages of learning, and among other things. Some of us, when I grew up right in this continent, we were punished for speaking in an African language because the language of the school was English. That is true for Anglophone Africa. It's still true for Lusophone Africa. It's still very true for Francophone Africa. And when we say African languages have to therefore be affirmed, revitalized, and intellectualized, we mean that their capacity must be developed so that they actually attain the capacity for them to teach in them mathematics, science, and other disciplines, so that they are languages to be used in all spheres of life. And when we say in all spheres of life, we mean from the mundane task of praying in them, of playing in them, and the more specialized task of teaching and learning in them, and researching in them, and disseminating knowledge in them, and of course to see them in all innovation and technological advancement in our society. That's the process of intellectualizing African languages so that we can use them in all spheres of life. Thank you, Chair.
With this kind of thinking, we have now come to a place where we're holding such conversations as we're having today. At this point in time, I would like to invite our invitees, is this anyone in the audience or a member of the panel who would like to make remarks on what Professor Kumalo has just shared? Comments, adding, because it is what we should be talking about very seriously, very often, until we actually solve these problems of our languages being suppressed and us still being oppressed and not allowed to live our lives the way we ought to live our lives, like everybody else, in a very natural way. Thank you very much, Professor Kumalo. I appreciate that. I think now I should hand over to Professor Mtembe. Professor, good day. You're very welcome, sir. This is a chance.
Yes. Hello?
Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you. Yep.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much. This is your opportunity to go home about who you are, what you do, and why. And for now, it's not about your presentation for this day per se. We just need to understand you as an expert in the field. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. My name is Alden Mutembe, an associate professor of African literature and the Mwalimu Julius Nyerere Professorial Chair in Kiswahili Studies at the University of Dar es Salaam. I used to be the director of Institute of Kiswahili Studies. This is the oldest institute of Kiswahili in the world. It started in 1930. So I was privileged to be the director of this institute. I teach literature, but also I teach linguistics and I teach Kiswahili literature and Kiswahili language to speakers of other languages. And I've been in the forefront in advocating the teaching of Swahili using other African languages. And that, actually that is the topic I'll also be touching today. But also advocating the reality of having our people get the knowledge through the language that they understand. We are now denying almost everybody, and one professor said it is mass killing where people are not able and are not free to speak their language, and they are not even taught in the language. So we are kind of playing game. We have been playing game for years and years and years. And the point is, for instance, there's no any reason as to why somebody should be taught, say, history in a foreign language. Why should somebody be taught geography in a foreign language? I mean, you need to know your people. So that is what I've been doing, besides teaching here and elsewhere. So that is generally my area.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate your presentation. It's not yet quite the formal presentation. It's just your introduction. And it's very interesting to learn of the work that you've done in a very, very reputable institution, the Institute of Kiswahili Studies that was started in 1930. I do have a question for you, because I know that President Nyerere at some time did make the proclamation on the language along the lines that have been touched on by Professor Kumalo, to say, as the leader of Tanzania, the then Tanzania, to declare that Swahili is going to be the formal national language. I have a personal experience of an uncle who studied medicine at the University of Dar es Salaam with his wife, my father's younger brother. They studied medicine, both of them, in Kiswahili in Tanzania in the early mid 70s. They came back to Swaziland, practiced medicine very, very effectively. Now, I think there are lessons to learn from that. We are not sure how President Nyerere got to that decision. But much as everybody was not literally agreeing, but we know that the country was turned around and a lot was achieved through that policy. Do you think you can share some light on how other countries, including our country, which has just received its independence in the last 20 years, and who are still struggling with the problems that Professor Kumalo has highlighted? To share a little bit,
Yes.
with the audience,
Yes.
how that was received.
Yeah, first of all, we should know that Mwalimu Nyerere, what he did in 1962 was to break the ice and
Hello, I'd like to hear Mutembe. Ningependa kumsikia Professor Mutembe.
Yes, I'm speaking. I'm speaking.
I think it's a technical problem. Let's just allow them to just solve it. So continue, please, Professor Mutembe.
Yes, I'm saying that in 1962, Mwalimu Nyerere broke the ice where he gave the first speech in Kiswahili in the parliament, and nobody actually was thought by that time that any other language besides English could be used in the parliament. So Nyerere, being the prime minister then, he broke the ice and he started giving a speech in Kiswahili, the same way as His Excellency Joaquim Chissano, the ex-president of Mozambique, did at the AU summit, where nobody was prepared, but he said, we discussed it, we had agreed that three African language, and here we are in the AU, nobody's using African language, and he started giving a speech in Kiswahili, and people run around to look for translators and interpreters and so on and so forth. So we need to have that kind of spirit where you say, we have decided, let's go on. We have to remove that ego that, it is my language, it is my tribe. That is what Nyerere killed, if I can use that, you kill that attitude where you think it is only your language and nothing else. So all of us, we agreed to have one strong language, and at the same time to maintain our own ethnic languages. So here we are more than 150 languages, but we have one common language, is Kiswahili. So I think that is what we need to be learning. Having one language does not mean that you kill other languages, because in Tanzania, we still have those languages. I'm a Haya, I speak Haya, but to me, Haya comes second. I am Swahili first and Haya the second. They are Chaga, they are Sukuma, and everybody else. So unfortunately, some people do not like to buy the idea that we can have one language that unites us and still have other ethnic languages. But of course, other thing we must use this language into the academia, from primary school to other levels, so that
Thank you so very much. And I think the audience is finding that very, very interesting, informative. And I think we need more of such conversation. Thank you very much, sir. Well, I think we have Sir Togo is very ready while our brother is sorting himself out. Can I give this opportunity to Togo? Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate you. To just introduce yourself, take your time, tell us who you are, tell us what you do, why you do it. It's going to help us going forward when we come to a presentation a little bit later on to appreciate you more. Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity that you gave me to express myself and this wonderful audience. I am Toko Watezwa. I am a sociolinguist. I am a sociolinguist and a teacher, language teacher. I'm a writer, a screenplay writer, and also a filmmaker. So this is what I do. And as a sociolinguist, this is a topic that interests me very much because Africa, as we all know, we are one people, but it happened that through the ages, some decided to go down the south, and so we spread all over, but we, as Bantu, all the languages are intermingled, and learning by our languages, it's the very best thing that we should do. But unfortunately, as one of the speakers highlighted, we grew up when we were at primary school, speaking your mother tongue was a serious offense. It was a serious offense. We had, for my case, we had to speak French as from the very low level. And this also has taken away the pride that we had in our own languages. So people, most of African people, they feel that talking in our own African languages is not worth it. But now we have to change this. And we have to change these things, not only just by talking. I got very good knowledge of what former President Nyerere did in Tanzania back in 1962. And also what is being done in Tanzania. But now, it's up to us now as linguists to develop this language, Kiswahili, which is a Bantu language, which is widely understood. I don't speak Swahili, but I understand Swahili. And I'm willing to learn Swahili. But we have to develop these textbooks. We have to develop all the means that the English, the French, the Portuguese did to spread their own languages. We have to develop those material so that people can learn the language. And because language, it's not just for the sake of communication, but it brings real people together. If you are comfortable speaking to your the one who's listening to you, the one you have encountered in your own language where you don't have any boundary, it will put you at a certain level of confidence in opening up yourself. And so us as researchers, we have to really dig and write, because so far we are putting the awareness that we have to utilize our own home language, which is Swahili, that was chosen by the AU. But now, what are the materials that are out there so that people can be using to learn this language? I don't see any. I say, I am willing to learn it. I can understand, because in Congo, Swahili is also spoken. I did Swahili when I was in my second year at the university. I did a little bit of Swahili, that's why I understand the written one and what they speak, but to produce it's a problem. So, and I have not found any text, any material that I can learn even by myself. So these are things that we must be looking at. We have to develop textbooks. We have to develop methods so that the Swahili can be spread all over. And it doesn't mean, as the previous professor was saying, it doesn't mean that when we adopt Swahili that our local languages, our small dialects are going to disappear. That's not the case. When you go, for example, because you can also learn from the example of others, when you go to Europe, they've got their small languages, their small languages in every country, but they've got main languages that they use to communicate when they do trading, when they do cross-border activities. So adopting this language won't kill at all our language, and it will even put more value on us, because we are more thinking in other people's languages instead of using our own. So it's us as researchers, us as writers, to develop material that can be used, that can be utilized to teach the language.
Thank you very much, sir. I really think that the audience has heard you, and we appreciate the work that you're doing. And I think it's going to come through very clearly in your presentation, and we'll start engaging you further from then on. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the time you've given us to introduce ourselves, the work we do. Can we call our praise singer, Mrisho Mpoto?
Kila lugha ina roho nyingine kama wajua, bali kilemba na joho uvishwa mtu mzawa, na hili kama hohoho uwasha na kupumua. Nimechoshwa na uroho, sasa nataka pumua. Titi la mama ni tamu, hata likiwa la mbwa. Lugha yangu ya utoto hata leo nimekuwa. Tangu ulimi mzito sasa kusema najua. Ni sawa na manukato moyoni mwangu na pua. Pori, bahari na mito napita nivitumia. Titi la mama ni tamu hata likiwa la mbwa. Ng'ombe anapoita ndama tunasema kuwa analia. Kupigwa na kulalama hatujawahi kusikia. Huu ni ukosefu wa hekima juu ya mambo haya, na inasemwa kwa lawama japokuwa lugha si mbaza. Mfano, neno jambo, mkato hauna jambo. Jibu lake si jambo, tafsiri sina jambo. Ukitazama ili jambo lizidishwavyo urembo ni kuulizana mambo kwa usemi wenye umbo. Maneno bila hesabu bado watu kuandika ni hazina ya dhahabu inayongoja kutumika. Mimi nadhani karibu siku njema itafika yawe kwenye vitabu na vinywa kuyatamka. Kila lugha ina roho nyingine kama unajua, bali kiremba na joho anavishwa mtu mzawa. Maneno ya uthabiti na maelezo ya jinsi nyingi na tofauti kwa fasaha na wepesi, kama lulu na yakuti, johari na almasi, yenye ladha ya sauti haijaonekana kwenye kamusi. Yenye ladha ya sauti haijaonekana kwenye kamusi. Kiswahili kina sifa kwa nahau na maana, kinayafanya mataifa mengi kusikilizana. Kikitoa taarifa, wengi tunakuwa bayana. Iwapo kitakufa, roho nyingi zitanuna. Nataka niwaambie, hakuna dhambi kubwa kama dhambi ya kutokuamini katika lugha za Kiafrika, katika lugha ambayo unaweza ukacheka, katika lugha ambayo unaweza ukaota, katika lugha ambayo unaweza ukasimulia hadithi na watu wakakuelewa. Kwa namna ya pekee, naomba nimshukuru sana Waziri wa Utamaduni, Sanaa na Michezo, ndugu yangu Nkosi Mati Mtetwa, lakini naomba nimshukuru Mkurugenzi Visimuzi Mkinaze ambaye ni mkurugenzi kwa kuhakikisha kwamba wanafanya jitihada za makusudi katika kuwaleta Waafrika pamoja. Wanatengeneza mabaraza ya mahojiano katika kuhakikisha watu wanahoji, jadiliana. Hakuna dhambi mbaya kama watu wenye umri mkubwa kuonekana watoto na wapumbavu kwenye mataifa mengine. Wakati ndio sasa. Kila mwenye nafasi, kila mwenye hekima anatakiwa awarudishe wengine katika lugha imejitosheleza. Lugha zetu za Kiafrika zinaweza, zetu tunaweza tukawasiliana, lugha zetu tunaweza tukateta, lugha zetu tunaweza tukaongea mambo ya jando na unyago ambao umeingiliwa sasa hivi umekuwa hauna siri tena. Baraza na kongamano hili ambao Mheshimiwa Waziri na mkurugenzi wametuleta pamoja, basi liende likalete tija kwa Waafrika wote duniani. Naamini nasema asante COVID kwa kutufanya tuendelee kutafakari na kufikiri ili tuweze kujadiliana upenuni kama tunavyojadiliana sasa. Asante Afrika. Mungu ibariki Afrika. Mungu abariki lugha za Kiafrika. Mungu nenda katutengeneze tuweze kuwasiliana tukiwa tunajua siri na mafanikio yetu. Asante sana.
I would like to call now our panelists. It's their time to share with us a few nuggets about the issues of language. Professor Mutembe, to share with us how to create a peaceful and secure Africa using our common cross-border languages. Thank you, Prof, and I appreciate you. Over to you, sir.
Let me again insist on the social cohesion. We need to see each other as belonging to a common society. A common indigenous language would avail us effective communication from where members would feel free and secure to talk to each other and reduce the tension and misunderstandings. We need to have a common understanding. Madam Chair, thank you very much.
The common understanding through the use of language and the common sharing of the same physical geographical space. In what concrete ways do you think, or let me put it this way, our point of departure from here on to where we can move from the conversation to some kind of action? Where do you think we could start as a continent using our already selected cross-border languages, Kiswahili and isiZulu and Setswana for South Africa? Setswana, isiZulu for us would be regional, but our common language, our small Kiswahili in South Africa and neighboring countries is indeed isiZulu. And I think Professor Khumalo will take us forward in terms of that, because we're here to learn from the lessons that Kiswahili learned in a very difficult way. But we do not have to invent the wheel. However, it is our vision also to elevate isiZulu to the level of function in the AU. It's the most developed, it's the most spoken, and so we need to learn from this right now, as they are going to be working side by side. And everybody knows, of course, that in 2019, the agreement between Tanzania and South Africa to work together in these initiatives is taking us to a place where we cannot now run away from the relationship, to help one another, to lead Africa as the AU has mandated. The chairperson of SADC happens to be the president of Tanzania, maybe the United Republic of Tanzania. The chairperson of the AU happens to be the president of South Africa. And here we are now. We need to find a place to begin. Let's give Professor Khumalo the chance. Sir, take it on, and your presentation, you can weave in these things that we've just alluded to. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I want also to thank my colleague, Professor Mtembe, for his illuminating presentation. Chair, I want to start by echoing your earlier acknowledgements of both the Minister, the Honorable Minister of Arts and Culture, Honorable Natim Chetwa Nyambose, and the DG Ukabazela, for accelerating the role of language in the country, internationally, by constantly and without fail celebrating these international days, such as the Mother Tongue Day, the International Translation Day, and last year, the Year of Indigenous Languages. And these are vitally important in that they continue to locate language as the center of our human existence. That language is very important for us to build a more cohesive society, and that language must indeed be seen as the glue through which we can actually want to acknowledge the role we have done in actually improving the way we have celebrated culture and locating language as the whole vehicle through which that culture is expressed, through which the heritage subsists. The title is The Role of African Languages in Fostering Unity, Social Cohesion, and Economic Transformation in Africa. And the sub-theme there, which I think is very, very important, is silencing the guns. To me, silencing the guns is a metaphor for peace. And I want us to pause a little to look at what peace is. Peace is the absence of war, the absence of conflict, or the absence of any disturbance. Peace is freedom from fear of any form of violence. Peace is harmony. And I want, in the context of that, to locate the importance of language in advancing harmony, in advancing peace, in silencing the gun. Our own iconic former president, Nelson Mandela, once said, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. Therein lies the centrality of language. Language is at the heart of our human existence. It is that which makes us human. We are defined by the fact that we speak. In my mother tongue, when a child first attains language, when they first blab out the first words, abadala bathi sekungumuntu, it is now a human. That's how language defines our human existence. It organizes and expresses our thoughts, and it also spurs our innovation. Now then, we look at the problem that has been burdened upon us by those that don't understand the linguistic composition in Africa and why Africa is blessed instead of cursed by multilingualism. I want to reiterate the fact that Africa is blessed with multiple tongues, ranging between 1,500 and 2,000 languages. It's a blessing, it's not a curse. It's a curse to those that want to continue to divide us using this multiplicity of languages. Some of these languages are spoken across the colonially imposed boundaries. Right here in South Africa, we have Setswana. Across the border, we have Setswana in Mozambique. That's what we mean by cross-border languages. It does not mean that because of the border that cuts between these two countries, therefore, Setswana is a different language that subsists in Botswana from the language that subsists in South Africa. You can locate these people back to the same heritage. These borders have created a facade that African people are alien to each other. By simply carrying a passport, requiring a passport that in order for you to visit South Africa from Botswana or the vice versa, you need to carry a passport. Therefore, you're an alien to the other country. And yet these people share a common language. They share a common heritage. They share a common culture. The African Union, through the ACALAN, the Academy of African Languages, has harmonized the orthographies of these, what they have called the vehicular cross-border languages, the languages that are spoken through these fuzzy borders that were imposed upon us through a conference in Berlin. The objective to harmonize these vehicular cross-border languages is to create what the African Union has set out to be an integrated, peaceful, prosperous Africa. So the African Union has already identified that in order for us to actually be fully integrated, we have to harmonize our languages. We have to bring together our differences that are magnified by these borders that cut across our countries. Africa, therefore, is anchored in its common heritage. And every single language in Africa can be traced back to a common ancestry, which is why we can actually learn from each other, a mission that Professor Mtembe and his institute has undertaken to teach an African language through another African language, because these languages speak to each other. They have a similar morpho-syntactic composition. They are traced back to the common heritage, and therefore, surely, they share a lot more than they differ. I want to argue, therefore, in this brief presentation that language is the vehicle through which we can achieve peace and harmony. That conflict in Africa, and particularly the recent surge in gender-based violence in South Africa, can be curbed through language. That through language, we can locate that which defines us as African people. And that through that language, we can locate the fountain of our culture and the common heritage that so defined us. And finally, to use the African idiom to confront our crises and douse the flames of anger, of conflict, and violence that is consuming our society. We need to sit down and confront this crisis. And we can only do that not through this borrowed language. And I'm sure the irony is not lost that we are sitting here and speaking in English when we do have the full command of our indigenous languages. And I want to highlight that point. We should be having multiple interpreters, me speaking comfortably in isiZulu, and everybody else listening through an automated speech translator into their own languages. The irony is not lost that we are using a colonial language to speak to each other. I want to share 3 idioms as a way, as a pointer, as an entry point through which we can achieve harmony, eradicate all forms of violence. If we can pause and look into where we are as African people, what instruments we have. And the biggest instrument that we are on about here is language. So I want to share 3 isiZulu proverbs. One is, intandane enhle, umakhothwa unina. That in itself tells you that in our African culture, a woman is indispensable. Then you ask yourself, why then do we see the kind of gender-based violence that is consuming our society and was solely highlighted by His Excellency last night? Intandane enhle, umakhothwa unina. I want to go to the second one because I want to tie them all together. Injobo enhle ithungelwa ebandla. United, we find better solutions. And again, this is located in our own African culture, in our own heritage system. We don't need to go and look for a solution from the capitals in Europe or in Washington. Right here, in our own language, we find this African wisdom. A crisis does not take itself away from us. We need to sit down and talk. Right now, the president highlighted the fact that we really need to look at this pandemic, which is not going to be solved by science in European capitals, as coronavirus is. But a pandemic that is destroying our very own society by men, killing his own woman, his own mother, his own sister, his own aunt. And the third one, umuzi wezikhwaga uyachitheka. Violence, conflict, war does not build any society. And in fact, if translated literally, it's very more disparaging than this. But suffice to say, violence, as we see in our society, conflict, as we see in our society today, does not build a society. So again, we don't need somebody, an NGO coming from Europe with lots and lots of millions of dollars to come and tell us that truth. We can sit down and confront the scourge using the instruments that we command so well, language. Our own African languages can be a vehicle through which we can create a harmonious society, eradicate all forms of violence. Nobody needs to tell us that a mother is very important, but our idiom does. Nobody needs to tell us that violence is a futile exercise, but our idiom does. And that we can't wait for someone coming from Europe to tell us that, no, we are going to destroy our very own society through violence. No, our idiom does. Therein lies the importance of language. This is how far colonialism has moved us away from a civilizing path. Because I'm sure without the accident of colonialism, we would not be this far. We would not be as debased as men in this country as we have become. Because our forefathers were more respecting to women than we are today. Again, because we have moved away from the fundamentals of our society. Our own African languages, our own culture, our own heritage. We really need to sit down and think deep about the role of African languages in confronting African crises so that we can come up with African solutions to the crisis that is destroying our society. And I cannot overemphasize the role of language in this. How do we elevate African languages? This is how I want to tie my introductory epithet. We can elevate African languages by speaking a lot these languages at home, at school, in church. I always laugh at my students that they pray to God in English more than they do in their mother tongue. And they want that God to bless them. Because African languages convey African worldview. If you are using a language, you are conveying that particular language's worldview.
Let's move on to another gun. The president of South Africa yesterday did talk about the violence against women. Gender-based violence is a human genocide. Gender-based violence is the gun that we need to silence. And how do we do that? Our languages are best suited to do this. Let me talk about Swahili. Swahili has the word which is called kufunga. Kufunga, to lock, is the key. My first language is Xhosa. Let's unpack this. In Xhosa, they have the word ukufunga, ukufunga, because all these words, they bring the primacy of women and the role that women play in society. The firstborn girl in Xhosa is called umafungwashe. In other words, it is the key to the family. Women have got a very important role. If we look at a Xhosa person when he vouches, he will say, ndifungu dadobao, ndifungu dadetu, ndifungu mama. So in other words, when I commit myself, when I vouch, I use a woman. So gender-based violence, therefore, is alien to us. It's a habit that we must have learned somewhere. And we know which culture has imposed violence on the continent. If our history has talked about the Western civilization, we probably would ask ourselves, what is civilized about people who plunder and loot? To the extent that when we look at our leadership now, they might have looked in wonder and say, we taught them very well. isiZulu and Sesotho, they are very, very important words. In Sesotho, they talk about Rahadi. And in isiZulu, they talk about Ubabekazi. When we talk about parity and 50-50 representation in parliament and so forth, our languages have mitigated that a long time ago. There is no gender which is superior to the other. We are not patriarchal. Babekazi puts Baba and Kazi, which is a woman, at the same level. In Sesotho, you have Ra and you have Khadi, which means these are at the same level. In Xhosa and Zulu as well, you have what you call malume. Malume. Lume is male and mama is female. So our languages, therefore, teaches us. They tell us who we are. So if the more we learn about our languages and cultures, it's a matter of having self-discovery. So we need to break the shackles of colonialism. So language has a very, very important role to play. I might zoom in as well to the question of language and economic development. There's no society which can be developed using a language of other people. Language and economic development have a symbiotic relationship. To promote sustainable and equitable economic growth and socio-economic development, we have to include language. If the Southern African SADC integration roadmap talks about unity, then language is going to be at the core. Let's look at the content of our own languages. Colonialism might have eroded others. Let's talk about trade. Kiswahili has 3 different words for rice. Of course, there might be a 4th one for pilau. But Swahili has the word mpunga, rice. Mchele, rice. Wali is rice. So it's the question of product, of production and consumption. There's a cultural understanding. We know that Maasai has different words for grass, but the fact that Swahili has different words for rice, it means a clear understanding of the relationship between production and consumption. Some of these words might have been eroded in our local languages when we talk about, for instance, in East Coast and Sotho, we talk about the venkile borrowed from Afrikaans. And we talk about shop in Gesizulu. Kiswahili has the word duka, which is an indigenous word for shop. So it means that, therefore, we have a very clear understanding of these concepts. So the more we learn about our languages, the better we'll be developed as people. Now, before I close, I just want to talk about Swahili in the South African context of a few minutes. Why it's important for us to learn
Hold on to your thought, Buti. Just hold on to your thought. Just hold on to where you left off. We're going to come back.
Okay.
In the interest of time, let's just give our other brother, here, Watizwa. Hold on to that because we're going somewhere with that thought. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Buti. Thank you. Let me give over for now so that we give everybody a time to present before we run out of our time. Upuzugile uzogcwalisa when we're wrapping up. Baba Mzee Watizwa. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. I'm Watezwa, not Watizwa.
Oh,
yes.
Watezwa.
Watezwa. Thank you so much. How can we build a strong, self-confident Africa in its Africa-based, inclusive and sustainable economic growth to be a united, influential partner in the continent on the global stage? This is a very good topic to talk about. And the need for greater African economic integration is ever urgent. And in addition to that, by carefully calibrating growth enhancing policies, African continent need to work together to promote peace and stability while addressing trade obstacles. In that perspective, the good news is that African political leaders made a far-reaching decision to move forward with Africa's economic integration through the African Continental Free Trade Area. Now, coming to the party, the African Development Bank rightly points out that a borderless Africa would lay the foundation for a viable continental market to accelerate growth and allow Africa to be more competitive in global trade and value chains. That would also allow industries to develop across borders, creating economies of scale for investors as they look at a wider integrated market. The aim for all these resolutions is to bring development in Africa by creating a prosperous continent, which is the only way we can effectively silence all the guns in our motherland. And if we have a close look at the AU vision in the 2063 agenda, the very first of the 7 aspirations reads, a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. That's the very first of the 7 aspirations for the AU vision in the 2063 agenda. Now the question is, how can we build that prosperous Africa? As we all talk about, even the previous panelists, we all saluted the AU resolution of choosing Kiswahili as the common African language. And here, I don't want to talk about indigenous language. I'm calling it African languages. And if you go to the definition of indigenous as produced by the English dictionary, they put it nicely. They just say the languages that of other people. But if we go to the French dictionary, they made it clear that indigenous means the language of the people who are not civilized enough. So the indigenous people, indigenous cultures are the non-European cultures and language. And which is very shocking, the thing that is very shocking is for those indigenous cultures and language, they just talk about the black languages. And when you go to Australia, they talk about the Aborigines, who are blacks. But they go to Vietnam, they found languages there, they never refer them to as indigenous languages. So let us talk about local languages, African languages. I'm very much comfortable talking about African languages as compared to the languages of the colonialists. So the bigger challenge that we have is to make this practical by elaborating well-adapted teaching programs throughout the continent. These are things that we really need to work at. The role of language in socio-economic development cannot be overemphasized. Where there is no language, as my previous brilliant panelists said, where there is no language, there is no development. And this is a fact. But however, the mere presence of a language does not entail facilitation of the primary purpose of language, which is communication. Effective communication facilitates development. And communication is an important prerequisite of the development, and this is manifested through language. In that perspective, language must be seen to be communicating the intended meaning as a vehicle to achieving set goals. And the use of a common language fosters confidence, unity, and facilitates economic growth within communities. Countries that speak the same language tend to trade more with each other than countries without a common language. To the extent that international trade promotes economic growth and development, one can conclude that a common language also leads to more growth and development. The youth that form the biggest part of the African continent must be well empowered through education to acquire all the skills in various domains of the economy to make of Africa a better place to live in. So basic education, technical education, and entrepreneurship must become a goal-oriented focus in our education programs, and this has to start now. Because it's good to get aware of something, but what is it that you do? If we just note that this is not so, should not be so, but what is the step that you take to change things? So this is what you should be thinking about. On the social, economic, cultural side, every African, from our leaders to the law workers, should participate in teaching or educating our youth that we are all one nation and one people that should live in harmony and peace for the development of our motherland. We must therefore induce self-acceptance in our people. The Ubuntu should not just be a slogan, but truly a way of life, a lifestyle, the way it used to be in the days of our forefathers. Self-acceptance. And as we said earlier in our introduction, Kiswahili, which was adopted, we have to put all the linguists, all the program designers to come and really produce learning and teaching materials so that this language can spread all over. Because as a Bantu language, my two predecessors, they were talking about the words that are in Swahili and their meaning and the connection with Zulu and isiXhosa. And as a Bantu language, I am from the Congo, but I am not a Swahili speaker because I'm from the west by the ocean. But as a Bantu language, Swahili is interconnected. So when they talk Swahili, even if I don't get it 100%, but 80% of it, I get it because the words are the same. And this is something that we have to build on. And I always said that, I already said that for us to develop, we don't necessarily need to speak all of us Swahili. Yes, it can be widely spread so that communication can pass through, but this cannot kill our own home languages, local languages. If you take the example of Europe, for example, as I said earlier on, they identify themselves on the English, French, or German, but they've got also some local languages, but that doesn't stop trade and development to take place. There are no borders in now in the Schengen states, and people, they move freely. They do business and establish themselves wherever they can. These are things that should happen in Africa. But before we reach that stage, the politicians have also to play a key role, because alleviating poverty will effectively make us to silence the guns. Because when people move from one country to another, because just of the mismanagement of that country, they go to another country. The way we cannot hide ourselves, people flock into South Africa just because some of the people out there, they don't have the heart for Africa, and what they do is just to loot for the benefit of the colonizers. And this will lead people to fight. But if every country, every African leader, every African country can stand to try to develop, we've got all the resources and we've got all that it takes, but just we must have the heart to develop what we have. And if we do so no one will be moving just to go establish himself in another country. Maybe we can just move to do business and then come back, or go wherever you want, the way it used to be. So these are things that we have to look at to silence guns. And I'm not coming back to the violence against the women, which is another thing. There are also so many challenges. And first and foremost, I think the love of our motherland, the love of our fellow Africans must be prioritized. Because sometimes we can't understand that sometimes we give preference to people coming from other continents and neglect or even forsake our own people, even though we look alike. These are things that we should be talking about to educate the youth, because African continent is the only continent that has a great number of youths as a population. So we will pass, but those that will come later on, they must be aware that we must love each other, and they must take over where we would have left it.
Thank you very much, Mzee Watezwa. That's another mouthful. Martin Luther said we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or perish together like fools. So the conversation today is echoing all of these things that we've been talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to respond to questions that the audience has posted to the panel. And I am going to request the panelists to respond as they feel led. But I would like for us to start with our brother, Zukile, to just, in preparation of, I'm going to ask you, Zukile, to respond first to the questions that I'm going to pose to you, to give you a chance to link this response you have to the last part that you were trying to outline, the relationship between language and concrete events, you know, things that cause the pressure on communication to be taken seriously because of the relationship with language and reality. The first question has come from the panel, Kudi. Two members of the audience are asking about why, if languages must be developed and even called indigenous languages and all of that, and yet we seem to neglect the Khoi and the sign languages. This question is open to every panelist, and I'm going to give everyone a chance to respond to that because it's very important. There is that narrative that the government or we are neglecting a certain section of the population, the San and the Khoi. Thank you, Kile.
I was saying that this year was an International Mother Tongue Day, in which the people, it was sponsored by this department, and the platform was there. And as I alluded first in my presentation, that we have a responsibility because the colonizers made it a point that they are going to wipe out the languages of these people and of our own brothers, and in an attempt to wipe them out. It is therefore our responsibility as well to include them in their dialogue. They are our brothers. Xhosa is very close to the Khoi languages. And I always say, when I go and get water, I get it from the Kriba River. And when I go and bath, I go and bath in the Tsomo River. So these are Kwe or Kwekwe words. So it means therefore that their history and ours cannot be separated. We are one. Going forward, we always need to work together. And as I say, that we also have a responsibility to empower these languages in the same sense that even our own languages are not empowered. The COVID workers, for instance, came to my house and I had to make a decision whether to cooperate or not, because in the format to fill it was in English and Afrikaans. It was not in my language, it was not in Xhosa, but when the national interest took precedence. So I had to cooperate for the sake of the COVID. But yes, I agree that they are part of us, part of South Africa. We need to work with them. Thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Torogo Denver, as well as Mishka Lewis. They were interested. I think you have answered, but I can give Professor Mtembe to add on and hear Professor Khumalo's add on before we take the other questions. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. During our discussion, a point came out saying, and this has been, had in several areas, that there is no science outside English, that English is the language of science. So it means actually, in a very ironical way, it means there's no science in Japan. English is the language of innovation. So there's no innovation in Germany because they don't speak English. There was no innovation in Greece back then. Then why? Because they don't speak English. So there is this kind of attitude or mindset saying, everything is in English. By the way, we are not saying English is not the language that somebody should, we're not saying somebody should not learn English. You must learn English, you must learn French, you must learn Arabic, you must, here I am, I'm studying Chinese. I'm a director of Chinese Institute, but what you are saying, let us use the African indigenous languages or African languages to make up, to make progress. So I wanted to, to say, to point out actually, to emphasize that fact, because our forefathers and our foremothers in the ancient Africa were not only innovative, but were also creative. And they did not use English. English by then, as a matter of fact, English did not exist by that time. Okay, so if we go back to that kind of a mentality, that our languages, so long as they are empowered, so long as we invest, and we invest heavily, we can make progress. We cannot, and we will never develop using French, Portuguese, English, and so on, colonial languages. We cannot, and we will never be independent if we stick and cling to the tunes of Francophonie or Anglophonie or Lussophonie or whatever. Okay, so the argument we are trying to say here is that let us invest and consciously invest heavily into African languages to be able to make, to develop, to make progress. And we're saying Swahili stands a better chance now to unite other languages, to enrich other languages, to revive other languages, so that Africa would realize the dream of being back together as it used to be back in million of years. So briefly, let us allow our business people get that point clearly, that once they invest into languages, the languages will come back and assist their business. Once they invest heavily into the languages, developed languages then will come back to assist in their businesses, whether printing business or any trade. So let us invest, that is my point. Let us invest into our languages. Thank you.
Which will link to Professor Khumalo's response and comment and remarks on this previous question. This question from Lungi says, how can publishing companies be convinced to print textbooks in African languages when schools do not teach this subject in African languages? Thank you, Mtu.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for the question. I think the earlier question pertaining to Khoi and sign languages is a legitimate question, because if we continue to ignore these languages and without putting an infrastructure that will raise the profile of these languages, we risk their death. And I think the world is poorer without any language out there. So it's something that I am sure the Department of Arts and Culture take very seriously, and hopefully PANSALB as well as a structure of our government, it takes that very, very seriously. I'm hoping that these things are noted for serious progress, because we are not here to diminish any language or the role of any language to anyone. If anything, every single language that is spoken by any human being must be promoted. So I will pack it there, because I'm really positive that PANSALB and the Arts and Culture are taking that matter very seriously, and they're giving it serious consideration. As to publishing in African languages, you know, the process to intellectualize isiZulu has been long, and we have faced a lot of daunting challenges, which we have gladly overcome. You have to incentivize the use of that language. There is no one who is going to invest a penny in a language that they don't see any incentive in its use, in its investment. So we have to approach, and I'm glad that not only are we producing academic books for isiZulu with an academic publisher as reputable as UKZN Press, we also publish annual literature in isiZulu, and we are producing all sorts of genres. We have produced poetry, we have produced women short stories written by women only. We have produced general short stories by any writer, and through a competition, by the way, with a process of adjudication and so on. You have to invest in a language for your publishers to see that this is attractive for me to publish. Once you start attracting a publisher, then you know that that language is gaining currency. It hasn't gained currency, but it's in the momentum of gaining currency. Sooner rather than later, publishers are going to be throwing themselves your way, wanting to publish in that particular language. But the initiative, it sits with the one who has the program to intellectualize, who has the program to develop that particular language. And I want to say something about African languages. There's something that Professor Mtembe mentioned. You know, this question, the fact that we have to defend African languages is an affront to ourselves. You know, it's a serious insult to ourselves. Why should I defend the use of an African language in an African continent? It means that we are cognitively damaged. There is something wrong with us. And it's not an accident, because those are the impact of colonialism. It's so shocking. We have not paused to look at how colonialism has impacted on African lives. We are cognitively damaged. We are conceptually and linguistically incarcerated. We are the biggest defenders of English, of French, of Portuguese in Africa. We ourselves. There is something wrong. We are so cognitively damaged. We need to step back and start taking stock of where the rain began to beat us, to borrow from a famous writer. We really need to sit down and look at the amount of damage that we have suffered. We need to actually fix ourselves so that next 10, 15 years from now, we don't need to defend the use of African languages in an African continent. That's an affront to ourselves. Chair, I thank you.
I appreciate that, Ndungu. I really do. The question, just to clarify, and the just last one note, is that the books have been produced, the books seem to be there, and they can continue to be there, but what use is this material if there is no teaching of the languages? And I think the universities may be different, but at what point should we start to be serious about this? How can we make sure that the production of literature, the production of textbooks is not just in vain, but it is addressing a void. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In this country, we need to fix the disjuncture between basic education and higher education. And I'm glad the DG is here, or the representatives of his office. We really need to fix the disjuncture between basic education and higher education, because a lot of things are happening in higher education. We have brilliant language policies for all the 26 universities, and all the 26 universities are experimenting with a lot of things that are happening in higher education. But that is not percolating down to basic education. In fact, if anything, basic education is going against the grain, because the powers of some of the schools that reside in school governing boards, they actually still can have the power to prescribe an African language. They can say, no, we prefer to have Afrikaans and English in this school and not isiZulu because it's useless for our children. That has to change, because I've said the defense of an African language in Africa it's an insult, really. We can't continue defending that, school X must teach isiZulu, school X must teach Itsonga, school X must teach Chivenda in an African country such as South Africa. So I really want our authorities, and this also talks to all the three institutions, Department of Arts and Culture, Higher Education, and PANSAB, to really fix the language situation in this country, because they have the constitutional power behind them. We as academics can do so much, but the people who have the constitutional power behind them are these venerated institutions at that. You know, our higher education, our basic education, and PANSAB. They really need to come up with a clear language for the country. That when we are developing these things, they are developed for use from primary school to higher education. Thank you, Chair.
I appreciate them, which means that there is some necessity to review the existing policies in education. Professor Mtembe, do you need to add something? Or let me just give our brother Togo right now to add, and then Professor Mtembe, and if Budzukile has, and then we'll hand over to our TPACE group to do the vote of thanks. Thank you, Mze Wadezwa.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I really liked the way Professor Kumalo said it, that we are really damaged. So we were so brainwashed that our own language, which represents our own identity, we have a tendency of neglecting it. And you will see even some people making fun of someone who makes a mistake in English or French. I mean, this is not our language. This is not our language. So we have to promote our own language. We are not going to expect the whites to come and write books for us to promote our languages. It's our business. We have to do so. We have to do so. So we have to work on that. And there's no language that should be left behind. All our languages, even if we can identify ourselves on a common language, but our primary local languages, we need to develop them. And then the academic says we must come on board to write programs, to write books, to produce things that can be attractive to people to be learning that. And they decide there's also a government. For example, we can say, I mean, the school governing body, they cannot decide on what to do. The government, they put all the powers to say, for example, in Gauteng, these are the languages that should be learned at school. And that should be implemented in all the schools. There's no one that should make a choice saying that, no, isiZulu is not well developed. Now, who do you expect to develop it? The child is born speaking isiZulu. Now, you impose him, you force him to be learning just English. Now, there is already a difficulty that you're creating by so doing. Then you'll see that the child starts failing then we end up saying that this child is not brilliant. Now, because there's a gap between what the mother tongue that he knows, proposes, and this language from abroad that you are forcing him to learn in.
Thank
So,
you, Mr. Wateswa. That is profound. The child is born, growing, speaking the mother tongue, and then the development part of his life that is taken away from him. Thank you very much. Everybody has highlighted the need for every other. Zukile and Professor Mtembe, the last before we hand over to TPACE.
Yes,
Do you have
Madam
any
Chair.
comment?
Sorry?
Thank you, sir. Go on, please.
Yes, I said earlier, and in responding to questions on language policies and education policies, they must change. They have to change. We are killing young, innovative minds. We are frustrating creative minds when we deny the youngsters the right to communicate and learn in their languages. We are actually frustrating the creative minds. We are actually killing the innovative minds. By the way, there is no any research that supports the argument that is put forward that when you learn, let's say, in science using English, then you also learn better English. No, we have to allow English teacher to teach English well, but then allow science teacher to teach science. We have to allow English teacher to teach English, and then allow the history teacher or geography teacher or biology teacher to teach biology, to teach geography, to teach history. There's no any research saying when you use English teaching biology, then at the same time you also teach English. No. So, Madam Chair, that I wanted to point out those two basic things. Let us allow creativity of our youngsters. Let us allow innovation of our youngsters by giving them the right to use their languages. Thank you, Madam.
Yes, I would like to make reference to two Kiswahili idioms. Was this impacts very well on us in terms of decolonizing ourselves. Kila ndege huruka kwa bawa lake. A bird flies with its own wings. The second one is mchinjaji hataki kumuona mwingine akichinja. You know, the butcher is not happy when the other one is slaughtering by himself. So our over-reliance on colonial languages has that effect. And as soon as Africans learn to speak to each other in their languages, that's where it's important that we begin to learn Kiswahili. Kiswahili, it's not very different from our languages. In other words, it's not threatening. It doesn't have elitism that English has. And further, the fact that it has been here for a very, very, very long time. When I grew up, there are a lot of Swahili words. You know, for instance, when you play football, we call kuteka. It's a Swahili word. I was born, it's there. It's still there. It's part of our slang. The word chakula is part of the township slang, and that's a Kiswahili word. If we look to the singers and the artists, always been using Kiswahili. Miriam Makeba, the song Malaika, and the young person now is called Shoma Josie, is part of the young generation. She uses Kiswahili, and it is very important, therefore, that we highlight this and as language activists, because it is only language activists which can create that change. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Gile. I thank the panel, and I think, and I do believe that in our reflection, in the report that we are going to pass on to the minister, maybe who may later engage, we're going to be able to figure it out going on in terms of how these things we've deliberated on are put into action. Ladies and gentlemen, I have no words to thank you and your contribution to the dialogue. And I thank you for answering so very accurately the questions from the audience. Very, very needly questions. I've heard them over and over again, but today I'm getting a sense that there's something that we have cracked. That key that Buzule referred to over above, we're going to open some doors that have been closed to us for a very long time. Thank you, Professor Mtembe. Thank you, Professor Langa. Thank you very much, Buzukile. Thank you, Mzee Toko. Thank you to the Minister of Arts and Culture, the Director General. And I'm giving over now to our TPACE, the Pan-African Cultural Experience, to do what they need to do. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joyce. This was very, very, very fruitful, if I may say. Just to quickly reiterate on what Dr. Langa, Dr. Kumalo, and Mr. Toko, what they actually said in terms of promoting our own languaging. This is very, very important and so crucial. And that is one of the reasons why TPACE, whom is the Pan-African Cultural Experience, was actually birthed. It was birthed for this reason, to be able to create a platform for all of us, not only to converse, but to actually take and stimulate and transform our information with regards to our African culture. So this is amazing. This that we have started here is it's actually a way forward to a new transformation. So thank you very much for that. I would just like to quickly give a vote of thanks without wasting any time, because we the conversation got very heated. So we have actually went over time. But I just want to say, wow, what a profound engagement we had. You know, with great panelists, Mr. Zukile, Mr. Toko, Dr. Mutembe from Tanzania, Dr. Langa, with Dr. Joyce as well, she just left. This was amazing. Thank you very much. I would just like to extend our gratitude. I would also just like to thank our praise singers. They brought a lot of live into this interesting conversation and dialogue. It was very educative, I must say, and you know, really, truly one can say we are one. And we need more, we need platforms. We need more platforms like these that, you know, where we actually just sit down and talk. Because from talking, you know, action will be taken. But if we cannot take action on something that we do not converse, or we do not sit on the table and on matters that, you know, are heated, but, you know, are not spoken of as a collaboration, if I may say. So just a quick one, I just want to take us through who TPACE is, because in doing all of this, I know we have not actually really explained or, you know, introduced what brought upon this platform and what is this platform, who is this platform exactly. This platform is the Pan-African Cultural Experience. As I said, Pan-African Cultural Experience it's an organization that was basically birthed out from, you know, from creating various social and economic intercontinental initiatives on our culture, on our indigenous culture and experiences. But our main focus was and is to create wealth through our, you know, African culture. We are saying we don't want to sit at a space where we are, you know, when other Western countries or other countries, when they come into the continent, they see us just as entertainment. We are saying we want to now create wealth through our cultural experiences. And, you know, how is it that we can move from where we are in terms of our culture, and which means from the peripheral to the mainstream? How can we move our cultural experiences from where they are to participating in the global market? So these are one of the reasons why we birthed out this initiative or this organization. But another one of our objectives as TPACE was to preserve our African culture. And what more in terms of preservation, other than having something like what we have just had now, where we can bring in stakeholders, where we can bring in key players from the whole African continent to converse and make the changes that are needed, and make also policy changes that are needed. So this is one of the reasons why the Pan-African cultural experience has been birthed out. Without wasting any more time, I would just like to, with all protocol observed, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of us as TPACE, allow me to extend our sincere appreciation to the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture, led by the Honorable Mr. Natim Tetwa, and Director General Mr. Vusim Kize, that gave us a word earlier on, for initiating this conversation at a continental level. I would also like to thank the Director General of International Relations, Mr. Rufus Matibe. I know he's not here, but he played a big role in making this happen and in working hand in hand with us and to make this project a success. We would like to thank our partners, both local and international, our diplomatic community. I saw Ms. Rose was also here from the Embassy of Tanzania, and everyone else who actually supported us and participated in this roundtable series. Definitely, we have opened a door that cannot be shut. I think it's an obvious one. We will definitely be having more, and we will definitely be developing more with more stakeholders to actually move Africa forward. So with all that being said, thank you very much for all those that are here. Thank you very much to the panelists again. You were amazing. And let's move this conversation forward. But let's not only talk, let us take action. Thank you.